First off, he praises John Paul II and Benedict for providing this option. So John Paul II provided what's called indult Latin masses. So the bishop could give special permission for a priest to say a Latin mass here and there. And then Benedict, with Summorum Pontificum, gave universal permission to all Catholic priests to say the Latin mass. But then Francis says, for those who did not feel good with the current liturgy, who had certain nostalgia. So for Francis, people like me who attend the traditional Latin Mass, I went to the Latin Mass today, this morning, as a matter of fact. He thinks that I go to the Latin Mass because I don't feel good with the current liturgy. So I guess it's a feeling, and actually I don't feel good when I go to the current liturgy, but that's the main reason I don't go is theological. It has to do with orthodoxy, the theology of sacrifice, and then also it has to do with liturgical customs that protect the Eucharist, for example, communion on the tongue, not on the hand. The restriction of sacred functions to sacred ministers like a priest and not to lay people who act as lectors and Eucharistic ministers. I got hundreds of videos on traditional Latin Mass and tradition, so I won't go into my own personal reasons right now, but it's not just because I don't feel good. And Francis says, a certain nostalgia. It's kind of like with my teen daughters, like, let's watch a black and white movie. Let's watch a classic. Let's watch Roman Holiday. It's kind of like, let's go back to an old time and for the sake of nostalgia, something nostalgic. So we want to kind of put on our three-piece suits and shine our shoes like grandpa, and mom puts on her pearls and her modest dress, and we walk down the sidewalk into the traditional church, and we get the holy water and we genuflect, and we're like, hey, Johnny, go on up there and get your cassock on so you can serve for Father. Yes, Daddy. Like it's a giant Leave It to Beaver LARP, but a church version. That's what they kind of think's going on. It's definitely not that. So here's how Francis sees it so far. People were nostalgic. People didn't feel good in the old one. So Benedict had exquisite humanity and provided this new thing, Summorum Pontificum, for them all to have Latin Mass. But it was transformed into an ideology. He says that is from a pastoral thing to an ideology. So, Francis says, we had to react with clear norms that put a limit to those who had not lived that experience, because it seemed to be fashionable in some places that young priests would say, oh, no, I want. And maybe they don't know Latin. They don't know what it means. Now, he had to lay down, according to him, actually his phrase here is react with clear norms. Your Holiness, why did you never react with clear norms on, abortion and politicians? Was there an ideology in politics that was against life? Against protecting human life? That was an ideology. And yet you never once reacted with clear norms on that, Your Holiness. Why is that? Why is the Latin Mass? Why is the bullseye on the Latin Mass to react with clear norms? But when it comes to politicians and the sanctity of marriage and the preservation of human life in the womb, never were any clear norms provided. No reaction. Your Holiness, in Germany, when all these bishops and priests were doing the blessings of alternative lifestyle unions, that was an ideology that came into the church. Did you react with clear norms, or did you do nothing? The answer is you did nothing. But when a bunch of nostalgic 1950 LARPers want to go to traditional Latin Mass with their 8 kids, you must, according to you, react with clear norms. Sounds like a double standard. And he says, priests, they didn't even know Latin. This goes back to this boomer accusation that before Vatican II, there was tons of liturgical abuse. You'll hear them say that, oh, there was so much liturgical abuse before the Vatican Council, Second Vatican Council. Like, really, what was happening? Well, the priest mumbled Latin and masses took 28 minutes. That's what they'll tell you. Those were the abuses before Vatican II. Masses took 20, low mass was 28 minutes, and the priest mumbled the Latin. I mean, they didn't even know what was going on in Latin. I know dozens of priests who say the Latin Mass. They all have studied Latin. Most of them say the breviary in Latin. The breviary in Latin is a major challenge. It's not just something that you would sit and do for a couple hours a day and just stare at text that you have no idea what you're looking at. Do they have to look things up? Yes. Do they have questions? Yes. It's a foreign language. It's not their native tongue. But to say that there are priests that go up on the altar and are just reading Latin lines and they have no idea what they're saying, like in a trance, is ridiculous. So Francis says they don't even know Latin. And on the other hand, Pope Francis says, on the other hand, to support and consolidate Summorum Pontificum, I did more or less the outline. I had it studied and I worked a lot with traditionalist people of good sense. I want to know who they are, Francis. Who are the traditionalist people with good sense that you worked with? Francis says, and the result was that the pastoral care must be taken with good limits. For example, the proclamation of the word be in a language that everyone understands. Otherwise, it would be laughing at the word of God. Okay, I can't say every, 99 point something percent of masses that I've been to on Sundays or holy days in the past 11 years, I've been going to Latin Mass for coming up on 12 years, the priest, after he reads or chants, or the subdeacon, the subdeacon does the epistle and the deacon does the gospel, the priest at the pulpit reads again the epistle and the gospel lesson in the English language, and then he preaches. It's universal practice. I've seen it done at Latin Mass in Rome. I've seen it done at Latin Mass in Mexico. I've seen it done at Latin Mass in the Holy Land, in Jerusalem. I've seen it done in Latin Mass down here in Texas. That's how everybody does it. So Pope Francis being like, well, I had this, worked really hard, and we said, we're going to have these priests say it in the vernacular. We already do that, Francis. It's already being done. And then he says that this would be like laughing at the word of God. Now, that's not appropriate because for hundreds of years, for example, St. Patrick, the missionary apostle of Ireland, he preached to the people in their Celtic languages, but he said Mass in Latin. And he read the epistle and the gospel in Latin, as a Catholic priest would in his time. You can't say that that's laughing at the word of God. That's a Lutheran thing to say. Lutherans believe that if it's not in the vernacular, it's pointless. That's not a Catholic teaching. After this motu proprio, a priest who wants to celebrate that is not in the same condition as before, that is for nostalgia, for desire, and so he has to ask permission from Rome, a kind of permission for bi-ritualism, which is given only by Rome, like a priest who celebrates the Eastern Rite and the Latin Rite. He is bi-ritual, but with permission of Rome, end quote from Francis. Before, people would say, well, Benedict said there is the extraordinary form, which is the Latin Mass, and then there's the Novus Ordo, and that's the ordinary form. So there's one Roman Rite in two forms, biformalism. Notice, by the way, that Ratzinger Benedict likes to bifurcate stuff. He likes to think that you can have a active and contemplative papacy, and you can have a extraordinary form of the Roman Mass and an ordinary form of the Roman Mass. He just likes, whenever there's some kind of contradiction after Vatican II, he's like, well, there's two of them. But Francis goes a step further. He said no more of this form, extraordinary form, ordinary form. It's two rites, the old rite and the new rite. Ooh. You know, a lot of trads in all sedevacantists that I know of say exactly the same thing that Francis said here, that there's not two forms of one rite. The Novus Ordo is a thing, and the Latin Mass is a thing. There's this rite and that rite. Francis kind of puts them back into competition with each other, as it had been under Archbishop Lefebvre and up until Summorum Pontificum with Pope Benedict XVI. In fact, the new motu proprio even says that the Novus Ordo is the Roman rite. It even says in the cover letter that it doesn't say extraordinary form, but the Missal of 1962 is sort of a concession to nostalgic people who are eventually going to die off and go away. And then he compares it to the Eastern Rite and the Latin Rite. Now, I would say, okay, Francis, if the Eastern Rite are their own rite and the Latin Mass ritual is its own rite, well, we should get our own patriarch, just like the Easterns get. They get a patriarch. We should get our own hierarchy and bishops, our own eparchies, our own dioceses. We should get our own canon law. We'll take 1917 Code of Canon Law. Thank you very much. We should get our own setup. If a priest, if by ritual is like Eastern and Roman rite, and saying the old Mass is like that, then we should get the whole Eastern Rite package.